Alright, we're in Volume 3. And we're at Part 1, Story 3. Weird. Did I do it on purpose? Might have did it on purpose. Okay. Part 1, Story 3, 2 Missing Men. That's what it says. The endless grumbling was too much for Moses, and no wonder. It was a hard enough job trying to take care of 1,000,000 men, women, and children through a hot, dry, barren wilderness without having to put up with all their fault finding. When Moses prayed about it, God told him to choose 70 of the best men of Israel to form a council to take a good share of his load. Then he wouldn't have to get all the blame when things seemed to go wrong. Jethro, his father-in-law, had once told him the same thing, and at the time Moses had appointed rulers over thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens. But even so, he was still killing himself with work and worry. Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, God said, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them to the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand there with thee. And of course, no illustration right here. Okay, and then we go here. Obediently, Moses made out a list of the best men he knew in the camp. Then he sent word to them to meet him at the door of the tabernacle. Strangely, only 68 came. When the roll was called, 2 were missing, Eldad and Medad. That's what it says. Their names suggest that they may have been brothers, maybe twins. Why they didn't come when Moses called them, the Bible doesn't say. Certainly it couldn't have been because they were rebellious and obstinate or anything of the sort. If they had been, Moses would have never chosen them to be members of the new council of Israel. Probably they were doing some kind of deed for somebody and couldn't leave it, or they didn't feel worthy of the honor that Moses had offered them. Anyway, they didn't come, and Moses had to go on without them. He set the 68 leaders around about the tabernacle and waited for God to act. Suddenly the pillar of cloud came down very close to them all, so near that they could hear God speak to Moses. Then something very wonderful happened. The Spirit of God came upon them all, and they prophesied and did not cease. Ooh, they did like the New Testament ones. They prophesied. Let's see what else happened. It must have been like what happened to the 1500 year. I got ahead of myself. Excuse me. It must have been what happened about 1500 years later at Pentecost, when the Holy Spirit came upon the disciples and began to talk about the wonderful things of God. Now we might see why Moses placed the 68 men around about the tabernacle. If they had been bunched up together and had all begun talking at once, there would have been a great confusion. But now each man had his own audience. That's what it says. And as the people who gathered around the tabernacle listened to the beautiful things the men were saying, they were impressed that Moses had chosen true men of God to be their spiritual leaders. In the midst of all the excitement, a young man pressed through the crowd and came running to Moses, crying, Eldad and Medad do prophesy in the camp. So God had not forgotten the two missing men, even though they did not had felt they had felt though they hadn't felt able for some reason or another to come to the meeting at the tabernacle. He had put his spirit upon them too, which proved that they must both have been very good men. And then we have two illustrations. Sorry about me scratching my back. It's starting to itch. And this is the first one, illustration. And then the bottom page illustration. And this must be the two guys that were in the group prophesying to everybody else. Okay. But Joshua didn't like what was going on. My Lord Moses, he cried, forbid them. He was afraid lest, if other people began to prophesy in the camp, it would take away some of Moses' power and authority. But Moses didn't mind. Evenest thou for my sake. Even vest thou for my sake. Okay, Envieste thou for my sake. He said, Would God that all the people, the Lord's people, were prophets, and that the Lord would put his spirit upon them. Moses wasn't a bit jealous because other people were beginning to do things that he had been trying to do to all by himself up to now. He was ready to share the glory of leadership if this was God's will. Why should he worry if Elad and Medad were prophesying in the camp? There would be 70 people doing this from now on, and he wished everybody in Israel were worthy of the honor. Those words of Moses, would God that all the Lord's people be prophets, are among the finest in the Bible. We should all try to remember them. For willingness to share the joys and rewards of leadership is a sign of real nobility. Only little selfish people try to keep the best things. The first place, the highest honor, all to themselves. And then it has an illustration, and this illustration is not antique, it's old. I mean, it's 1954, or in the 1950s. And it's a group of ladies at a seamstress with checking out the dresses that was made. Huh. Okay, so that was part 1, story 3. Now I'm going to break, and the reason why I'm dividing them up is easier to find them that way. So we're going to break this one and go to the next one. If it will.